we see cases every day where one child literally keeps the parent under lock and key. Why did I have this 40-year-old, 50-year-old? I wish they would go back in my womb. जिस बेटा तुम्हारे साथ रह रहा है, तुम उसकी छत नहीं उठा सकते. Girls somehow had been conditioned to think that we do not have the moral right to claim our parents' property. If it's agricultural property, it will go from male heir to male heir. If there's no male heir, then it will go to the wife. It excludes the daughter, it excludes the mother. A woman married outside community, she is excommunicated. They can say she's a witch and she's excommunicated. So money is a great asset and it's also a great curse.
Welcome back, ma'am, to After Hours Season 4 powered by Catch. It's a pleasure to see you again. I think the last conversation that we had just did so well. And I got such amazing feedback on it that I was like, okay, if I want to have another interesting conversation, then the only person I want to call is you, especially when it comes to the law. How have you been?
Wonderful. I've been very well. And it's really lovely to be back. That was a fun conversation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a subject which was
Not
serious.
so fun. Yeah.
But the way, just chatting with you was a very nice, enjoyable talk.
Thank you. The thing is, even though what we discussed was actually, of course, a serious topic, as you said, which was divorce and alimony and everything that goes along with it. And it's a morbid sort of, topic. But most things that need to, be known sometimes can come in this sort of category.
That's
and I
right.
think one more topic that I really, really wanted to actually discuss with you was, of course, inheritance. Everybody in their family has these stories where somebody or the other, whether it's a chacha or a mama or a bua or a masi or whatever, has had grudges about the inheritance that they've been willed or not willed, or they've had sort of their right on. You, I'm sure, have experienced so many of such cases. What do you think is the most common cause of property disputes?
So, first, I want to talk before I start on the subject. I wanted to refer to a meme which I saw yesterday or day before, where the person goes back to his doctor and the doctor says, "Your family must be so thrilled that you've got your hearing back." He says, "I've still not told them. And in this week, I've changed my will thrice." So he keeps hearing, because they imagine he can't hear. So they keep saying all these things.
Yeah.
And then he keeps changing the will. And I
Yeah.
said, so true. If a person could just know what his family thought when he's gone, then he would have made a different will.
100%.
So the law has evolved. And in a sense, I'm very surprised sometimes when I see the law in many Western countries where people can't even will away their entire estate. And I am so surprised that, say, 50% or some portion of it will go to their sons and to their legal heirs. And 50% or some portion is for them to will. And for a person who stands for my inalienable human right to do what I will with the property that I have made, and I may give it to a charity, I may give it to the dog or the cat next door. It's so surprising that people do this. And this was one of the questions that I was asking some of the lawyers. I said, how come this law has evolved? Because ultimately, in India, we brought in the Indian Succession Act as a result of looking at the law saying, I can will my self acquired property to anyone that I may decide to this new aspect. And they said, well, now we are talking about second wives, third wives. You may, that person may make sure that you cut out the children from the first wife. You may cut out the children from a third wife. You may cut out somebody. So the law is evolving to ensure that somebody doesn't do something in a split of being over influenced by another person. So, coming to Indian law, we have the Indian Succession Act. So, first, more important than the Hindu Succession Act, because the Hindu Succession Act deals with Hindu joint family property. Now, that is dwindling over the years. We used to have Hindu joint family property. All properties were joint. You were living in joint families. You were living together. So there was a big element of property, which was joint family property, ancestral property. It's giving in to people saying property is self acquired. It is made by the dint of my own hard work. I've started this entrepreneurship. My father gave me these shares. My mother gave me these shares. From these shares, I have developed A, B, C properties. These are self acquired. I have added to my wealth. I have collected much more. I have been an entrepreneur. I've been a businessman. I've been a professional. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. Everything is what I have added as a result of my hard work. It becomes your self acquired property.
Okay.
If property is self acquired, then you can dispose it by two means. You can make a will, or you can, by intestacy, that means the person dies without leaving a will.
Yeah.
Now, therefore, you'll see it is in this area as well as under the Hindu Succession Act. We'll just come to that later, because I thought this is what is more important.
Yeah.
People feeling miffed that my father, we are three siblings, and my father has given it to one sibling and cut out the other two. So there is a lot of angst. And this is so unfortunate, because look, ultimately, you live by property and you live by relationships. You're actually breaking a relationship if you're telling your parent, give me the lion's share, by influencing. Because look, people are today living to 80, 90, and huge,
Yeah,
very
larger life
late.
expectancy. Yeah.
And therefore, in the last few years, some people are suffering dementia, some people are suffering Alzheimer's, some people are suffering Parkinson. You know, there will be issues with the parents. And then they may be, and you also, old age brings its own vulnerability and own dependency on the child that you live with, or the child that is more aggressive or more controlled.
Yep. Very fair point. Correct.
So this is an aspect which I keep feeling, not as a lawyer, but as a person, that why would you want to lose your sister or brother for the sake of getting that much larger a chunk of the property?
Yeah.
You're losing a relationship for gaining a property, and very often unfairly. And all this angst comes because mostly someone somewhere feels cheated. This person has influenced my parent.
Yeah.
This person, and we see cases every day where one child literally keeps the parent under lock and key and then says, because they know the person's getting infirm, getting old. You don't let the other brothers, sisters come to visit. They are trying to get orders from the court. We want to go see our parent. The parent who's influenced and petrified of one brother or one sister, whoever is more greedy, more controlling, says, tell the court that you don't want to meet your son or daughter. So these poor parents who are 80 and 90 come in their feeble wheelchairs and say, we don't want to meet our child. Our child's not been good to us, and we don't know how true that is.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the cases, nobody would have been downright bad because everybody is looking at that golden pot at the end.
Hmm.
So nobody wants to be bad to the parent who's going to be giving them all this.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you are
A rotten person.
so rotten
Yeah.
that you are sending your child to your parent to an ashram and you are trying to make gifts during their lifetime.
Yeah.
So one of the things which I feel and is this element of gift.
Hmm.
Does a child have a right to insist on their parent, please make a gift to me in your lifetime?
Not at all.
I think it's very unfair unless the parent has so much property that they want to distribute at least some of it during their lifetime.
Hmm.
According to me, all of it should mostly devolve after the demise. They should be able to enjoy and have control.
Hmm.
See, there'll be people who have so many pots of money that they will live well even if they are keeping, say, a 1/4 or a half to themselves. And then they say, okay, let me give. But assume a parent who has only one home. Why and how can one child say, you gift it in your lifetime so that my brothers and sisters can't claim it?
Hmm.
And this happens. And it is because the poor parent has become very credulous, very feeble. The mind or the heart is controlled so strongly by one child that that child then prevents entry of other children coming,
Hmm.
makes sure there's a gift in their favor, makes sure that that person can't revoke their gift, and they play upon the mind, whether it's by giving them food, whether it's by giving them employees, whether it's by letting them call and meet the people and the friends they want. So this brings out some of the nastiest part of human nature to my
Yeah.
mind. It brings out what you don't want to see.
Hmm.
Because what you want to see is loving children and loving parents. And I feel
Loving
to-
siblings also.
and loving siblings, and to a large extent, a parent to be slightly unequal if they feel that one of the children need a little more economic help than the other.
Yeah, true.
One is doing brilliantly well, one is struggling. Why should that parent not be able to do a little bit more?
Yeah.
So it's not that it's a bias, it's there may be a slight bias for one child or the other.
You feel sorry, you want to help out more the child that is probably not doing as well as the other. You feel like they're in a weaker sort of position, so you want to step in and help them out.
So, one of the things which everybody says is if you are propertied, you should call your children and make them sit across you and tell them, look, this is what I am thinking of doing. I have this one house, it has 3 floors. I'll give you the ground floor, I'll give you the first floor, I'll give you the second floor. Second floor is not fully built, so I'll give you a little extra. This is possible. But you may end up not having 3 children any longer, but 3 enemies.
Yeah.
So the question is, it's supposed to be very good to be transparent. But do you really need to be transparent if you realize that your children will then not be as good. So money is a great asset, and it's also a great curse.
It's also a great way to know whether people are actually well intentioned or not.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
Throw them a
true.
little bait and then you'll know which one. Like you said in the meme, you'll get to know when you throw a little bait who's with you for the money and who really wants to just do
Yes,
it as service.
yes. And you see that. You see people suddenly being sweet when they've never been sweet. You see them turn nasty if they're not getting anything. So this is not, I mean, a lot of people must be thinking, why did I have this 40-year-old, 50-year-old? I wish they would go back in my womb at this time.
Yeah, I'm
You
sure.
know, so this is an issue, but most important, what I think one should look at is, and this is my philosophy. So I'm just passing on my philosophy. It need not be true for everybody. Nothing's always true. As far as possible, between husband and wife, if you actually have a good relationship, it depends whether you have a good relationship, give a major chunk to your spouse. Your children will remember to respect that spouse in old age.
Yeah.
So, a major chunk, I'm not saying everything,
Yeah.
but give a major chunk to
Fair
your
enough.
spouse, whether you're the husband or the wife, because all the property may be in the name of the wife, all the property may be in the name of the husband. Give a major chunk to your spouse, because you will be sure, even if you have the best of children, that those best of children, having married out, may have a controlling husband, may have a controlling wife, may have a greedy husband, may have a greedy wife, that your spouse will,
Stay
if you
protected.
trust them,
Yeah.
will remain protected. Second, I think most people should make wills, and in good time. Everybody thinks I am going to live long. Everybody thinks I'm going to live long. You ask me, I will think, all right, I may have this health issue, that health issue, but I'm not going to go anywhere. Nobody thinks they'll have an accident. Nobody thinks something will happen to them untoward. It happens. And if it happens, then you don't want a war breaking out.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want wonderful children, you want wonderful spouses. And I see it day after day. Excellent children who will tell the mother, if the father's died untimely, look, we are giving you no objections. It'll all be in your name. We don't even want to claim a penny. So while they are good, there are bad.
Yeah.
And while there are bad, there are good. But you may be in a position where suddenly the children turn greedy, fathers died. If it's intestacy, I will get 1/4. I'd rather get my 1/4 now rather than give a no objection to my wife, to my mother. So, and the mother may feel I'm ruthless because they may be dividing up that house into 4 pieces, and that's way it would have to be sold. So, first make a will in time. And a will is a very simple thing to make.
मैम व्हाट इज अ गुड टाइम टू मेक अ विल? जैसे अभी आपने बोला कि मतलब लोग विल नहीं छोड़ के जाते, तो दैट इज वन ऑफ द रीजंस व्हाई डिस्प्यूट्स अकर लेटर. तो क्या ये टाइम होता है जिसमें पेरेंट्स को डिसाइड कर लेना चाहिए कि चाहे जितना भी है, वेदर यू हैव पॉट्स ऑफ गोल्ड और नॉट, वेदर यू हैव वन हाउस और यू हैव अ लॉट ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी, व्हेन शुड वन मेक अ विल कि बस अब इसके बाद जो भी हो विल बी सॉर्टेड?
देखो कि जो वसीयत होती है, विल आप किसी भी टाइम बना सकते हो और कितनी भी टाइम बदल सकते हो. तो मैं ये सजेस्ट नहीं कर रही कि आप विल बनाओ और बदलते रहो. दिस इज ऑल्सो नॉट अ गुड आइडिया. बहुत सोच समझ के विल बनानी चाहिए. और विल को फिर अगर आप सोच समझ के 5 साल बाद या 10 साल बाद या 20 साल बाद आपको ख्याल आता है कि देखिए अब मेरे ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन हो गए हैं, मैं खाली अपने बच्चों को नहीं देना चाहते, मैं अपने ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन को भी कुछ कुछ देना चाहता हूँ या चाहती हूँ। तो यू कैन मेक अ न्यू विल। आप विल की कोडिसिल भी बना सकते हैं।
Codicil is like an amendment?
कोडिसिल इज लाइक एन अमेंडमेंट, और उसका लॉ ऑलमोस्ट सेम होता है, एक्सेप्ट आप कहते हो मैंने ये विल बनाई और उसके बाद मैंने उसमें ये अमेंडमेंट्स, ये बदलाव किया, छोटा छोटा, जो भी, बहुत बड़ा नहीं, बिकॉज फिर इससे तो आप दोबारा एक वसीयत बना लो। और दूसरी बात है, क्या विल की रजिस्ट्रेशन जरूरी है कि नहीं?
I was going to ask you that.
या तो विल की रजिस्ट्रेशन जरूरी नहीं है, पर उससे बहुत फायदा होता है। अगर आप विल को रजिस्टर करा लो तो प्रिजम्पशन हो जाती है थोड़ी विल के फेवर में, क्योंकि ये हो गया कि दस्तखत जेन्युइन है, दस्तखत सही है, जो दो गवाह हैं उनके भी फोटो साथ ली जाती है। आजकल दिल्ली में तो वीडियोग्राफ भी ले लेते हैं, सेइंग मैंने ये विल बनाई है, इसमें ये
इसको इतना दिया है।
हाँ, नहीं, विल को पढ़ो या ना पढ़ो, ये दो गवाह मेरे साथ थे। और मेरा अपना व्यू ये है, जो मैं हर क्लाइंट को एडवाइस करती हूँ, कि अगर तुम्हारे पास कोई डॉक्टर हो तो विल के टाइम जब भी आप विल बनाओ तो आप एक डॉक्टर का सर्टिफिकेट भी ले लो, या डॉक्टर बहुत क्लोज है, नज़दीक है आपके, तो उसको विटनेस भी बना लो।
उससे क्या होता है फायदा?
कि आप साउंड डिस्पोजिंग माइंड के हैं।
नोटेड।
आप आधे से ज़्यादा विल्स इस ग्राउंड पे चैलेंज होती हैं कि मेरे माँ बाप, मेरी माँ अपनी होश खो बैठी थी,
She was not in a sound mind.
she was mentally unstable, she was wavering mind, and you see this. I have seen wills where there are 3 brothers, so one brother, for whatever reason the parents are not fond, one will happens in Missouri where it's given to brother A. One's will happens in Delhi where the brother B lives in favor of brother B. 1 year later, she's again visiting brother A in Missouri. She does it in favor of brother A.
So she's changed it several times.
Changes it all the time. That actually takes away from the sanctity of the will.
From the credibility of it, because you don't know which one then.
And many of them, all of them, वो जो भाई जिसके पास होते हैं वो रजिस्टर करवा देते हैं। So एक तो ये बहुत बड़ी problem
So you can
है.
register the will multiple times?
Any number of times. New wills, every time you make a new will, you can register it. Question is, one should make it with a lot of thought, lot of sense, and sometimes you make an executor of a will, and the question that is asked, particularly in the West, is, suppose I was to die untimely, who would I trust my child to? That is the person you appoint as executor of your will. So you have 3 children. The one that you have, that even if you're giving equally, the one that you trust a little bit more, that you know will honor your will, that's the person
who should execute it.
Yes. And the witnesses to a will, apart from the doctor if you have, or a certificate from a doctor, should be people who are not octogenarians like you. कोई 80-90 साल को विटनेस, चाहे तुम्हारा दोस्त हो, उसको विटनेस नहीं बनाएंगे, क्योंकि वो तुम्हारे को अगर नहीं सर्वाइव करें तो who will come and testify regarding your will?
True.
तो आप 40-50 साल के,
younger than
30 साल के, younger, मतलब younger than you नहीं, just
objectively young,
over dependable, not somebody who can be bought out. So those, I remember one of the judges telling me in one of my cases, Ms. Rudra, who is the witness? And I said, it's a property broker. He says, I don't believe this will. I'm going to scrap it. So
Hmm.
it's not universal, but the fact is, you want a person who will be known to you, whether through your children, whether through your friends, be your friend's child,
Hmm.
somebody who will not be bought out
Hmm.
and who will be. So people often believe good, respectable lawyers, which who normally are not very happy to be witnessing because they don't want to enter the
Hmm.
witness box. But that's how I'm saying, if you have respectable people, it's really goes a long way
Hmm.
to proving the will.
I'll get Varun. Respectable lawyer. But,
Very good.
ma'am, tell me something. Can a registered will be challenged?
A
In a
registered will can absolutely be equally challenged as a non registered will. So there's no question of not being subject. It's just that the challenge narrows.
Okay.
So you've been through a sub registrar, you've gone to the sub registrar. Sub registrar also comes to the house. If you if there are special circumstances, sub registrar will also come to the house. But normally you would go to the sub registrar, and there you're walking up the aisle, you're getting photographs taken, you are having two people who are sound who are with you. So these aspects actually help in proving that the person was right. Now, you also suppose I bring an imposter and say this was A B and get a signature which is similar to AB and bring it. Now, if it's registered, you have photographs.
Yeah.
So it'll be the same person.
Hmm.
So it narrows down the controversy. It will still be that was the person
Of a sound
sound
mind. Yeah.
disposing mind?
Yeah.
Was the person under coercion?
Hmm.
Was the parent child keeping that parent under lock and key?
Hmm.
So this particularly happens, and I have seen it uh, in cases where I've seen it very carefully. That there was this very old man in Delhi, in one of the South Delhi colonies, and he was so disgusted with his children that he gave his property to a person who was being kind to him and giving him food and looking after him, taking him to the doctor, unlike the children. But the children managed to challenge the will and they won, even
Hmm.
though that person had actually made the will because it
And this was a
looked
registered will.
registered.
Wow.
Because that man said, I will give it to anyone but
But
my
my
children.
children.
But the children challenged, why will a person give a will property to all his properties to a third person?
Hmm.
And those are expensive South Delhi properties. Why will he do it? It's not conceivable. It's illogical. It's suspicious. So then you can find some little mistake. And
Some
this
loophole.
some little loophole. So the best wills are those which are very simply written because you will find lesser loopholes in simple wills than something which is long and winding and will talk. For example, if you take a person who has had a history of moody behavior and then he's made a will where he's or she has made many lopsided wills that which don't look logical.
Hmm.
One you and this particularly happens if you don't have children.
Okay.
There are many couples that don't have children.
But then who do they will it to? Koi bhi.
They will will it to their brother's children who've looked after them. They will will it to their sister's children. They will it even to their domestic staff. They will it to whoever's been serving them.
I
So,
believe Ratan Tata did the same, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not very sure, but this is not unknown that people will. I know a will where a person said, if X predeceases me, which was the one child that that person was fond of, then he had given it all to a charity. So finally, what happened? That X did not predecease him, so that condition didn't come into play, but it could possibly happen. So the what you have to take care in wills is you don't make them so long-winded as say my daughter's very well off. My daughter I have provided at the time of her marriage. Uh, but in actual fact, the daughter's not so well off. Now, there's a standard clause every lawyer will put in. My daughter's well off, so I'm not giving her. So, one thing I want to talk when I'm saying this, it's not relevant who you will it to, but there is a big tendency in India still to do
बेटी को नहीं देना.
properties in name of the son. बेटी को नहीं देना, बेटी को बहुत कम देना है, बेटी को कैश दे देना है, बेटी को मूवेबल दे देना है. इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी बिकॉज यू आर लिविंग, योर सन लिव्स विद यू. तुम कहते हो कि इनकी इस मेरे बेटे को जाए, मेरे बेटे की वाइफ को जाए, उसके बच्चों को जाए, बेटी को कुछ नहीं देना है. सो दिस इज अ बिग thought. And I am not saying that you want your house split into fragments. Because ultimately your house should be a composite house. And if your son's living with you, maybe you want to provide a roof. But I feel that ultimately you love both children equally.
Yeah.
There should be an element of some kind of equality.
But isn't that why there was an amendment to the Hindu Succession Act in 2005 that allowed both the daughter and the son to have an equal right?
So I'll talk of the Hindu Succession Act. We're still talking of wills, intestacy, and self-acquired.
Correct.
And what I am talking about is कि अगर कोई अपनी निजी संपत्ति से मर जाए, छोड़ के मर जाए, तो हिंदू सक्सेशन एक्ट उसमें नहीं अप्लाई करेगा.
ठीक है.
इंडियन सक्सेशन एक्ट अप्लाई करेगा और द लॉ अनलेस and I'll explain the exception. Under section 30, you can will away your share in the joint family property also. But, and it's a thought which we need to see. Girls are entitled to their parents' property. They are also entitled to their in-laws' property under the Hindu Succession Act. So they have a double benefit. Now, how fair is that? I do believe that they should be entitled, but do you do a double whammy? Then the man may say, why should I not be an in-law in my mother-in-law's property or father-in-law's property and get a right there? So it's the law will have to become more logical. So we'll come back to the Hindu Succession Act. I was just talking about the Indian Succession Act. So make simple wills, give to whoever you like because it's your property. But remember this, that unless you have done some huge amount for your daughters at the time of their marriages, give them the respect and equality that you have given them during your lifetime. So I'm not saying fragment the property. In fact, I'm all against fragmentation of property. तुम जिस बेटा तुम्हारे साथ रह रहा है, तुम उसकी छत नहीं उठा सकते, ले सकते हो. तुमको उसको छत अभी भी वही देनी है. Everybody doesn't own 5 properties that they can say, okay, I have 3 children. I will give 1 property to my son, 1 to 2 to my 2 daughters. It's not, maybe not possible. But I feel, and it is earlier times, I used to see that even if no will was left, girls just gave no objections to their brothers, saying,
नहीं
you
चाहिए.
take it, I don't want. मुझे नहीं चाहिए. पर आज की डेट में you see women and their husbands fight equally for the property. Earlier fights इसलिए कम भी होती थी, not because there was amendment to Hindu Succession Act, because this we are talking only about self-acquired property. It was because girls somehow had been conditioned to think that we do not have the moral right to claim our parents' property.
Correct.
And we will only look at our in-laws. That's our new home.
हाँ, क्योंकि वो पूरी कंडीशनिंग ऑफ तुम्हारा अब ये घर नहीं है, अब वही तुम्हारा घर है, तो हेंस तुम्हारी फाइनेंशियल स्टेबिलिटी भी वहीं से आएगी अब.
So when I must have started practice, majority of women would say that we don't want to claim. Please take the no objection. We don't want a right. Boys used to say very often, we don't want a right. Let it go to our mother. But today the world is different.
And greedy.
And greedy. And very, very greedy.
Yeah.
And very, very righteous. In fact, they'll mind if we say it's greedy. They'll say, क्यों हमारा हक है, आप हमें greedy क्यों कह रहे हो, हमारा ये हक है और हम अपना हक कर रहे हैं. आप इक्वालिटी की बात कर रहे हो, एंड बात भी सही है.
हाँ,
उनकी
conceptually तो सही
उनकी
है.
बात तो बिल्कुल सही है. It's just that I feel greed should not come whether it's a boy or a girl.
True. Greed in general is just a bad quality to have. I think gender non-specific, ना बेटे को होनी चाहिए ना बेटी को होनी चाहिए. But Indian Succession Act में, is there a gender bias?
So the act doesn't have, the Hindu Succession Act used to have a gender bias. I'll explain that. But, and I'll just come to that. The law with regard to wills, basically there's no gender bias except one small one. I think that is that if a property belonged to a husband, then went to the wife, then she died without leaving any legal heirs, then instead of going to her class 2 heirs, it will go back to the husband's class 2 heirs.
Got it.
So that little gender bias, it was sought to be addressed by the Supreme Court recently. Now, there is a gender bias, for example, in the agricultural laws. Delhi Land Reforms Act has a section 50A, which says that if it's agricultural property, non-urbanized village, it will go from male heir to male heir. If there's no male heir, then it will go to the wife. It excludes the daughter, it excludes the mother. So it goes against the spirit of the class 1 heirs. And that, I think, because it's part of the 9th schedule, the court hasn't still struck it down, even though, and this is becoming slightly technical, but even if it hasn't struck it down, because it is in that part of the Constitution of India which is beyond reproach by the courts.
Okay.
So जो लैंड रिफॉर्म्स एक्ट हैं वो क्योंकि प्रॉपर्टी को डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करने के थे, भूमिदारी राइट्स देने के लिए थे, उसमें लैंड रेवेन्यू लॉज, लैंड रिफॉर्म्स एक्ट, लैंड सीलिंग एक्ट्स, ये सब थोड़ा प्रॉपर्टी को डिवीजन करने का अटेम्प्ट था, या प्रॉपर्टी की डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, जिसने इतने दिन लैंड को टिल किया है, जो भूमिदार है, जो असामी है, उन सब के हकों को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए था। उसमें ये एक बहुत आर्किक सेक्शन घुसा हुआ है, सेक्शन 50, और ये मुझे लगता है कि कोर्ट्स को आर्टिकल 14 के ग्राउंड पे कि दिस पर्पस वाज समथिंग एल्स, बट बिकॉज वो 9 शेड्यूल से प्रोटेक्टेड है, देयरफॉर बेटी, एंड typical case that we are doing where the lady is saying I have this right, और इसमें our argument is slightly different since it's sub judice. I won't say it. This applies only to rural villages, not urbanized villages.
Okay.
तो दिल्ली में आप ये देखो, समलका, वेस्टर्न ग्रीन्स, all these are really
Expensive real estate.
expensive real estate
Yeah.
residential properties.
Yeah.
जब तक कि ये unurbanized villages थी, that law, which
Was-
is an archaic law,
was applicable.
still applicable, and it's unfair.
100%.
I remember Secretary of Delhi government was asking me, how unfair is this? How can this law not be struck down?
क्योंकि किसी की अगर सिर्फ बेटियां हैं तो फिर
हाँ, तो क्या करोगे?
हाँ.
So this is a very absurd law, और मुझे लगता है कि इसमें कानून में परिवर्तन आना चाहिए. And similarly, Hindu tribal women, we had on behalf of Madhukeshwar, and the lady who was one of the Ho tribals, उसके बाद उसकी persecution भी बहुत हुई because that lady added her name, saying कि अगर you marry out of your community, out of the tribal community, you lose your right to your property, and it doesn't come to you, it goes to your husbands, brothers, and cousins, just because you have done a marriage which is out of your caste or community. Now, how unfair is this? So, कानून में अभी भी बहुत कमियां हैं, बहुत सी कमियां पूरी हो गई हैं, इसीलिए एक बहुत हो रही है आर्ग्यूमेंट कि यू हैव अ यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड, बिकॉज अगर यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड होगा, ऑल दीज प्रॉब्लम्स like Muslim men will get double the property which Muslim women will get, and so on, if you went by intestacy. तो इस सब कानून में परिवर्तन की जरूरत है. And I'm not talking only of them. Hindu tribals, अभी बहुत हाल ही में सुप्रीम कोर्ट में केस संतल और भीम ट्राइबल्स का आया, और मधुकेश्वर वाला केस हमने, मेरे को लग रहा है 10-15 साल पहले हमने फाइल किया था, challenging the Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act. So what they do is they can declare a woman married outside community, she is excommunicated. They can say she's a witch and she's excommunicated.
What does a witch mean? मतलब
But
क्या?
they just do it to deprive her of her property.
So you can call anyone a witch.
You call the woman a witch and you deprive her of the property under their tribal law. And therefore, when we challenge this, the Supreme Court told us this is for Parliament, or Chota Nagpur tenancy would be, I think, under Jharkhand or Bihar, कि go to the state legislature, should do the amendment. और संथल्स और भील्स का same problem हुआ, and the Supreme Court has even now said this is for Parliament to amend.
it sounds bizarre to me, which also makes me understand that I come from so much privilege. This just sounds
So
so
unfair.
strange.
So look at Parsis. Parsis women, if they marry outside their community, again they lose certain rights. In fact, there's a recent case, Master Rian, court has issued notice on it. And there's another earlier case. In fact, I have appeared in that matter also, for a Parsi woman who is married to a non-Parsi. So you lose several rights. There is still a need for greater equality. I won't say equality, but greater equality.
Hmm.
So these laws are unequal, and therefore you need to redress. And Article 14, they stand in the way of Article 14, 15, which says equality to all, irrespective of sex. But because tribal laws, you have to protect tribal customs, tribal laws. Therefore, in the guise of protection,
कुछ भी
they
हो रहा है.
get unequal
Yeah.
rights. So these are some aspects which I remember there was a lady who challenged the law with regard to the right of Syrian Christian women. So these cases stand out where women have tried to strike at the inequality provision, because tribal women actually pull the weight. वो सारा काम वो करती हैं, घास वो करती हैं, चारा वो करती हैं. 2011 और 12 के जो सेंसस में tribal women owned only 11% of the tribal land, and the men owned 88.7% of the land. 2016, it has come to some 16%.
Barely any, marginal.
Barely
Yeah.
anything. So you see, men have 84, women have 16. Women had 11, men had 89, literally 88.7. So this is
The disparity.
the effect, because the tribal laws which need amendment. So question is, the moment आप किसी community का law challenge करोगे और कहोगे कि ये unequal है because of religious reasons, it will obviously hurt that
Yeah.
people. Hindus till 1937, women did not have a right to property. As late as 1937, it's this Hindu women had a limited right of estate during a lifetime kind of right. So it is the Hindu Succession Act and these laws which have given and made their rights more complete.
But even in Hindu Succession Act, I think 56 की है, वो 2005 तक नहीं था उसमें. मतलब 50 साल after the Succession Act also women didn't have equal right.
So the fact is, पहले तो women का right to property नहीं था, फिर women का right as co-partner नहीं था, फिर women का right to be कर्ता नहीं था. So all these changes have come in effect from 2005. And fortunately, there is a recent judgment about which there is little controversy that it may be referred to a still larger bench called Vanita Sharma. So, usme court said not only will the 2005 amendment which gives women right be that they are co-partners, they have a right to property and they have an equal right, but it will have retrospective operation unless a final partition has already taken place before this act came into being. If final partition has not happened, they will still have
Change
a
it
right.
retrospectively.
So this is the joint family property, this is ancestral property, and the law after coming into force of Hindu Succession Act really bought in rights of women
Hmm.
after the 2005 amendment. And Maharashtra, I think, came up with the state amendment before this amendment.
Hmm.
So, in many senses, Maharashtra, even for women to get, the court fees को माफ करना और बहुत चीजें, Maharashtra has led the way in some progressive laws for
Hmm.
women. But the amendment of 2005 for under Hindu Succession Act has had far-reaching consequence.
Hmm.
इससे women को of joint family property, Hindu ancestral property, women have really got rights. And this latest judgment of Supreme Court, which says that it will be retrospective, has probably opened a huge floodgate of rights for women.
तो आई वांटेड टू आस्क यू कि मतलब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल मैंने रजिस्टर कर दी है विल, ठीक है, और अब उसका आउटकम रेट्रोस्पेक्टिवली जाके हम चैलेंज कर सकते हैं?
मैं मतलब नहीं समझी। अगर मैंने पहले विल बनाई है फिर दोबारा विल बनाई,
नहीं, मैंने पहले विल बनाई और वो सबने अपना ले लिया हिस्सा, पर क्या बाद में जाके कोई कुछ साल बाद ये बोल सकता है कि नहीं ये चैलेंज करूं इवन दो आई हैव टेकन इट?
सो देखो, पहले तो विल के चैलेंज में a probate was required in the 4 presidency towns. It's not required in Delhi. But बाकी जो presidency towns हैं, बॉम्बे, मद्रास, कैलकाटा, इन सब presidency towns, इन सब में 4 क्या हुए, 3 हुए. But the presidency towns में you need a probate.
What is a probate?
Probate is you have to go to court and say ये मेरी will है या ये मतलब deceased की will है rather, and इस will को अमल किया जाए, इसको enforce किया जाए. इसमें एक इशू आता है which is important कि क्या आप possession में हो, because अगर आप possession में हो तो कोर्ट फीस आपको बहुत नोशनल लगानी होती है, और आप कब्जे में नहीं हो तो आपकी कोर्ट फीस बहुत ज़्यादा लगती है, तो लोग उसी से डर जाते. तो ये एक मुझे तो बहुत इलॉजिकल लगती है बात, बट दैट्स व्हाट द लॉ सेज. नाउ इट इज लॉ आल्सो सेज कि presumption is of joint possession of joint family property. Matlab, for example, if 2 people or 3 people have one house, but only say the brother is living in that house, would the presumption be that the sisters have already been ousted or not? The presumption under Hindu law is it is joint. Unless you can show ouster कि मेरी बहन आई थी और मैंने धक्के मार के उसको निकाल दिया था, and therefore that is the presumption. Then the stamp duty is much more and the court fees is much more. Now people get scared कि पता नहीं हम जीतेंगे नहीं जीतेंगे, litigation so expensive. So this is a big issue. So presumption is of jointness unless you show ouster. This is a very important aspect of property disputes and law. But your question on the will, I can only understand that it could be that suppose it is taken कि किसी ने प्रॉपर्टी दी है वाइफ को, and the issue is it a life interest or is it her absolute property? Then you may go back to see what should be the interpretation. Justice Enlaw की एक जजमेंट थी, he says कि आपको अगर प्रोबेट के लिए डालना है या प्रॉपर्टी का क्लेम डालना है बेस्ड ऑन अ विल, यू शुड डू इट विद इन 3 years. I don't think the law of limitation really applied, except you can say कि since there is no limitation, so it should go under 137 saying presumed in the जनरल क्लॉजेस कि अगर कोई स्पेशल प्रोविजन नहीं है तो 3 साल में डालना, पर मुझे नहीं लगता कि इट शुड हैव बीन नेसेसरी कि आप बिल्कुल ही विल को इन्फोर्स करने के लिए 3 साल बाद डालो, क्योंकि तुम तभी डालोगे जब दूसरा आदमी आपको तुम्हारा हक नहीं दे रहा। सपोज ये प्रिजम्पशन होगी मेरा भाई या मेरी बहन तो मुझे हक देंगे, तो तुम केस नहीं डालते हो। जब तुम्हारे हक पे आंच आती है तभी तुम डालोगे। सो आई डोंट नो, बट द लॉ एज इट स्टैंड्स इज यू शुड फाइल विद इन 3 years।
अच्छा, टेल मी समथिंग, एज लेट्स से हमारे ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स के ज़माने में उन्होंने एक पेपर पे लिख दिया कि मेरा ये है, ये इसको जाना है, ये है, इसको जाना है। डज़ दैट काउंट एज़ अ विल?
No, it doesn't.
इट्स जस्ट अ विश लिस्ट देन?
It's a wish list, and if you belong to one of the premier families of India where there was respect for the patriarch to the extent of the word of the patriarch is
Final.
law,
Yeah.
then that piece of paper was implemented in those families without question. Otherwise, the will has to be witnessed in the proper manner with the two witnesses signing in the presence of the testator. That is, जो will बना रहा है उसको testator कहते हैं, और जिसने वसीयत बनाई है। सो ये सब बहुत ज़रूरी है। विल बहुत सिंपल होनी चाहिए अकॉर्डिंग टू मी,
ताकि
कि
लूपहोल्स का स्कोप
उसमें लूपहोल का स्कोप नहीं हो। सिंपल सी विल बननी चाहिए, और बहुत उसमें स्कोप नहीं होना चाहिए। फॉर एग्जांपल, अब एट वन टाइम मेरे पास 5 प्रॉपर्टीज़ हैं। बाय द टाइम द पर्सन डाइज उसके पास 5 की जगह 2 हैं, तो कोई कहेगा अच्छा ये 2 का ये हो गया, उन्होंने तो बेच दी, उन्होंने बेटियों को ये 2 दी थी, इसका मतलब सारी विल क्वेश्चन मार्क हो गई, क्या नहीं हुई। इस आदमी की दोबारा शादी हो गई, तो डिड ही वांट, कुड ही बी स्टैंड बाय दिस विल बिकॉज ही इज रीमैरिड। So there are many of these issues which also arise. But one of the big issues is the mental health and capacity and capability of the person that makes the will. अब ये आपने शुरू में ये क्वेश्चन पूछा जो मैंने जवाब नहीं दिया कि विल कब बनानी चाहिए। तो मुझे लगता है विल जल्दी से जल्दी बनानी चाहिए। As soon as you have some assets, please, everyone should make a will, whether they are married, unmarried, whether they have children, no children, because it will go to class 1 years agar koi will nahi banai ho equally. But still, it is better to have a will than to have a dispute. I feel wills are equally disputed. It's not कि मैंने will बना दी है. So many times to get around a will, you do a family arrangement where everybody signs. 3 भाई बहन हैं, माँ बाप हैं, भाई ऐसे ऐसे बंटवारा होगा, पर बहुत लोग नहीं करते हैं बिकॉज वो बच्चों को नहीं बताना चाहते कि ठीक है मैं तुम्हारी बहन को ज्यादा दे रहा हूँ या तुम्हारे
Yeah.
भाई को ज्यादा दे रहा हूँ या तुम्हें कुछ नहीं दे रहा हूँ। So all that also, it depends on the confidence between the parties. It depends on the extent of properties.
It's completely dependent on interpersonal equations.
But I feel it's always good to make a registered will. That
Noted. I'm going to take that with me. I'm going to tell my parents and keep that in mind as well. The last question that, I'm going to ask you. You've had a very, very busy 2024. And, I'm sure that given the legal disputes that are endless in our country, you're going to have a busy 2025 also. What do you do to unwind after us? How do you just relax?
So, if you are asking me during COVID time, because that's the time that we got the most time to relax.
Yeah.
um, and I have this very uneven roof on the top of my house. But in those 3 levels, I walked and walked till I did my 10 to 20,000 steps. The other thing which I did was I did a lot of cooking. So, in my spare time, of which during court times I have very little,
Yeah, of course.
I enjoy cooking. It's actually very de-stressing, according to me.
Yeah.
And then you can scold the others who cook and pretend that you are a superior cook. That's very good. So I love
The
doing
senior
that.
advocate energy.
So I enjoy that. I enjoy reading books. I enjoy walking. When I was more energetic, I enjoyed playing hockey and other
Wow.
sports. But in my less energetic avatar, I like watching movies. I like chatting with people. I like cooking for people. That's my not so energetic avatar. And then I love hearing praise when if I have cooked well or badly, because everybody is forced to say that it's good, even if it's not good. I bully them to say that what I have done is a good work of art. Thank you.
खाना सिर्फ खाना नहीं होता, it's also validation, it's also comfort, it's also therapeutic. So I will also take that. I'm not a very, very good cook. I'm just strictly average, but I can do it for sustenance. I prefer cleaning. But thank you, ma'am, for your time. As always, a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you again. And I'm so glad कि I hope I can keep interacting with you like this. और कभी केस की वजह से ना हो.
हाँ बिल्कुल ऐसे होना है. And you promised me a dinner, so we have to go out. अगर हम खाना नहीं बनाएंगे, पर एटलीस्ट खा तो सकते हैं.
बिल्कुल खा सकते हैं.
हाँ?
बिल्कुल खा सकते हैं. And now when you're free next, you tell me and we'll go out for that meal.
Absolutely.
Done.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, we have a little present for you. Hopefully, this will aid your cooking.
Wonderful. This is my favorite brand.
Amazing.
So thank you. Thank you.